Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I should, I tend to wander around. I probably ought to turn this so I can pick me up a little bit better. I'm usually sitting behind the keyboard typing every day, so I don't get a chance to get out and talk in public very often. And when Doug offered the opportunity for me to come up here and talk about my work, seems strange to refer to it as work because I enjoy it so much. I didn't want to pass it up because I found I don't particularly like to go out and be in front of the public, but I find that when I do, I tend to get quite a bit of new information that comes flowing in my way because the word spreads about Spared and Shared and these letters and diaries that exist out there, either from the people who attend the lectures that I give, or they spread the word to others and word gets around. So I do take advantage of these opportunities. As Doug said, I retired 15 years ago. My expertise field that I worked in was actually environment, safety, and health. And I was in the field my entire career, working at mostly national laboratories. You've probably heard of Argonne National Laboratory in Chicago. I worked at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory out in Colorado. And finally at the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory in Chicago. And my job there was as the Environment Safety and Health Director to protect the environment, to work with my staff to make sure that the people were safe and all. But when I retired 15 years ago, I have to say I felt like a big burden was lifted from my shoulders because that's a lot of responsibility for those labs that are doing that kind of far out research. But when I retired, I felt like I still had useful years of experience, of capability to do something meaningful with my life. And so I always enjoyed history and actually wanted to go into history as a career, but felt that I couldn't make a lot of money as a history professor. So I chose the field that I went into instead. But when I did retire, I thought this is my chance to find something to do in the history field. And so I had always read books. These are some of the books that I had collected through the years. I'd read a lot of books while I was working in my field. I belong to the Book of the Month Club, as many of you may have done in the past. I don't even know if they exist anymore. I assume they do. But in the 1990s, around 2000, I was getting books every month, and I was just reading all the time. And there were 3 books that I called out here in particular that I wanted to call your attention to. This one is very old, Billings, Hardtack and Coffee. I mention these 3 books in particular because if anybody wants to do transcriptions of Civil War letters, I think reading these 3 books is kind of a must because this book and Bill Wiley's book will give people a good understanding of what camp life was like, what the soldiers experienced in their daily lives while in the service. And then this book in particular, McPherson's book, really gives you good exposure to the reasons why soldiers were motivated to fight in the war, either whether they were for the North or for the South. And I think that by reading these books, when you're transcribing and you're struggling with trying to understand what somebody's trying to say, having read these books and knowing what's happening in camp, what camp life is like, some of the vernacular that they use, it helps you transcribe the letters. It's not a reason for having that slide up there to begin with. Sometimes I talk to groups who are interested in transcriptions, and so that's why I put this in here. And this is kind of a follow-up on that same theme. To do transcriptions, to do good transcriptions, you really need to know the subject quite well, learn the vernacular. I find that reading the letter or diary as if it was written to me helps me. I think too many people transcribe letters and they kind of get lost in thought. They just capture the words, but they're not really thinking what the person's trying to say. And I find it's really useful to try to stay focused on what they're trying to say, because their use of punctuation is so poor that oftentimes that you'll find sentences run together and you read them and you're just like, that doesn't make any sense at all. I can't understand what they're trying to say. And so it helps to really stay focused. I don't even play background music or anything while I'm transcribing, because I find it too much of a distraction. I want to stay focused on what they're saying. So the rest of this is, I don't want to insult your intelligence. You're all experienced Civil War buffs, so I don't need to go into that. As I said, my professional career was not history, but I've always been this avid reader. I spent quite a bit of time early in life transcribing family letters. I don't have any Civil War letters written by my ancestors, though they were in the war, but I don't have Civil War letters from them, but I have earlier letters from the 1840s and 50s that were passed down in our family. And so I spent quite a bit of time learning how people wrote from the mid-19th century by cutting my teeth transcribing those letters. The other thing I want to mention before I move off this slide is that the birth of eBay in 1995 really, I think, suddenly made a lot of material available. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because while it made it available, while it suddenly made it available, it made it more valuable, because now people could sell it to a wider market, so the price of this material went up. So it was good from the point of view is that material now is valuable, it wasn't getting thrown away. But it's also kind of bad in the sense that people also didn't want to necessarily just gift it to a museum, right? Because it's too valuable, or they want to sell it, or to another collector or something. So what I found was, when I retired and started looking at material on eBay, was that there was a lot of history captured in there, but it wasn't. My fear was that it wouldn't get transcribed and shared with the public. Since it's in private hands, some collectors do a great job of preserving the material and storing it in places where it won't be damaged. But there's a lot of people who have it, might be stored in their attic or in their basement, and when you read about all the floods and hurricanes and fires that are happening, especially now, it seems all over the U.S. I have to say, anytime I see any kind of disaster on TV, I can't help but ask myself, how much history are we losing? I think of that big flood that went through North Carolina and wiped out a bunch of communities not that long ago, and I thought, oh my God, just think of the history being lost there. So my proposal, once I realized that all this history was on eBay, was to go to one of the largest eBay volume dealers that I noticed was selling a lot of material back 15 years ago. I reached out to him just on a lark. It's probably a shock to receive an email from me, but I said, would you be interested in the following proposal? If you send me scans of material that you're posting, these letters or diaries on eBay, if you send me scans of these material and allow me to transcribe them, I'll transcribe them for free. I'll do the research on who wrote the letters. I will call out any significant information that's in the letters as far as historical events, what's important about the letters. I'll give you that information, and you can then use that when you turn around and sell material on eBay. I'm sure that it will enhance your sales, because he was selling a lot of stuff where he didn't identify who wrote it. He didn't even have necessarily the regiment that the soldier was serving in. It may have been about a letter that was about the Battle of Shiloh, and didn't even mention Shiloh in the advertisement on his eBay site. And so there were a lot of potential buyers who were missing out on this material as a result of the lack of identity that went with the material he was posting. And once that became available, then a lot more people started bidding on it, and his prices have gone up. So that was the deal. As I said, the only thing he kept saying, how much money you want? And I said, no, I don't want money. I'm retired, I'm doing fine, I don't need money. I just want to save the history. And the only thing that I would ask is that in exchange for the transcription and the research that I give you, you authorize me to publish it on a website that I create. Because if I'm going to do this much work, I want to make it available to people so that they can benefit from it. Saving the history. So, as I said, the history gets saved. The material, much of what I've published on my Spirit Insured sites is still in private hands. I know some of it was subsequently purchased by somebody who has contributed it to a library or an archive or something, but most of it is still in private hands today. The platform that I publish all this Spirit Insured material on is WordPress, and it became available back in 2003. I started using it sometime after that. It's been 15 years now since I started to publish on their website. When I first started this project, I didn't know how long I would be doing it, and so I just signed up for their free web space. So I wasn't paying for the space that I was using. That was great. It's inexpensive, didn't cost me anything, but there was also a limit on how much space that they would give you. And I found that by the time I transcribed the letters, wrote up the research, I always put the scans of the letters I include with the posting, with the transcription. That way, if people want to see the original letters, they can actually enlarge them to full size on their computer screens, or they can even download them if they want. That's very important, by the way, for authors of books who want to use this material, because they oftentimes hate to rely on my transcription. They want to verify for themselves that how I've transcribed the letter is actually the way it reads. And so I insist on putting the scans of the letters on the web as well. As I said, the downside of this was that while it's free, there's limits on space, and I found that I was loading up the websites too quickly. And so they now offer, it's cheap now, you can get a few gigabytes for $50 a year on web space, so it's actually not a bad deal anymore. But as a consequence of that, using the space for free, I started out with Spirit Insured 1, and then when I filled that up, I did Spirit Insured 2 and 3, and now I'm working on Spirit Insured 23 already. I've loaded it up so many. Plus I have 160 at least. There's more than that now, I'm sure. Separate websites that are not identified in any way, shape, or form with Spirit Insured. I think if you go to those websites, you won't even see that Spirit Insured on there. But those websites were created separately on WordPress because they were such large archives of letters that I didn't want to dump that entire load of letters on with all the other letters. I wanted it to stand alone and sort of showcase it separately. And so those were separate archives. So this is what my current web page, Spirit Insured 23, looks like. If you go to a site, you'll typically see a picture of a soldier, if I can get it. If I can't get a picture of the author, I try to find one that's maybe a soldier from the same regiment, so that people can get an idea what their uniform might have looked like. And then this is a little bit of my intro, and then I have transcription, and then I show the complete transcription, and at the bottom of it is where I attach the scans of the letters. I started getting publicity on my work several years ago, in particular when John Banks published, he used to do a regular column in Civil War Times magazine. I'm sure you're all familiar with that magazine. It's out of circulation now, but at that time he published this story, interviewed me and published this story, and I started getting quite a bit more people reaching out to me with their own letters after that happened. Jerry Prokopowicz does this Civil War talk radio, and maybe some of you have listened to him before, weekly broadcast, and he interviewed me for that. And then Will Eichler and I have collaborated on some things as well. This is John Hennessy. I don't know how many of you know him. He's retired now as well. He was the chief historian at Fredericksburg, working for the Park Service. At the time of his retirement, he's written several books, particularly on Bull Run. But he found out that I was posting a lot of letters pertaining to the battlefields of the battlefields that he was responsible for as the Park Service, which would have been Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville and the Wilderness. So he wanted to know if I had any problem with them downloading all of the letters, the transcriptions of the letters that pertain to those battlefields, and archiving them in their archives there at the National Park Service in Fredericksburg. And so he had reached out to me. We had a conversation about it, and I said, no, there's no problem at all. I mean, people reach out to me all the time and ask if they can use this material, and I said, that's what it's there for. Please use it. You know? Mm-hmm. So he did a broadcast on radio shortly after he and I had talked, and so I think this will play a little bit of the radio broadcast.
Remarkable sites that I've seen on Facebook or on the internet. He has a Facebook page as well. It's not a Facebook site. It's a site called Spared and Shared. A guy named Griff, that's all I know. He's not from this part of the world. What he does, or what he's been doing for quite a long time, is to contact the owners or the dealers, oftentimes, who are selling letters and diaries online. Or people contact him too, I think, and offering stuff. And he transcribes them and posts them. But what he does is he also puts in a tremendous effort to find out as much as he can about people who are writing these letters. And he puts them online. And it's an astonishing sight because of the volume. The man clearly wakes up in the morning, starts transcribing it, at night. Because every day, literally every day, he's posting stuff that he has transcribed online. And it's all beautiful. I mean, he pays attention to design, he uses graphics beautifully. It is a pleasure to use his site. It's called Spared and Shared. He has a Facebook page called Spared and Shared. But more than that, it is for someone like me, or really anyone who just wants to take a dive into primary source material. Boy, this is just a treasure trove of stuff. Hundreds, thousands of letters he has transcribed over the years. And some of them are just individual letters from individual soldiers or civilians. Others are whole groups, wartime runs of letters, a whole collection from the soldier or between the members of a family. And that's really kind of one of the things that makes this particularly valuable is wherever he can, he gets both the outgoing letter home from the soldier, which are typically preserved, but a surprising amount of time he also has the incoming letters from home, from the wife or the mother or the family at home, and he writes about them. Yesterday on his Facebook page, he put up a letter from a soldier relating his encounter with a local woman. And the soldier wrote, the old lady of the house why then she thought there would be nobody since sentiment fighting each other. And that's a sentiment you often hear that really, if you hear it in almost every war. If you left it up to the soldiers, peace would be at hand. They would figure it out. No one's actually ever tried that in the history of the world so far as we know, except maybe for the Christmas truce in World War I in 1914. But so these letters are just a treasure trove. If I think people get intimidated by source material sometimes because there's so much of it. But he has a tremendous eye, and he's done us all a great favor by really applying this idea that something to be easy to consume, it also has to be nice to look at and well organized. And so he pays a lot of attention to that. And so not only are there the letters here, but there's the story of people here. And it really is a unique site in our business, one that is growing, and it is saving. And what I like about it as a historian is when these letter collections go on sale on eBay or wherever they go on sale, oftentimes when they're purchased, they disappear. Right? They're no longer available to researchers or scholars. So he is saving them for scholarly use. It'll be interesting to see how we manage a site like his going forward, because we don't know how long digital data is going to last. We know paper will last for centuries. We don't know how long digital data will last. So, so we work out an agreement with him, or talked with him. I talked to him about our exchange emails, and I said, do you mind if we save the stuff that's relevant to our area to the files of the department? We are doing that. But that by itself is a big job, because there's dozens and dozens of letters that needs to come up with.
I'm going to cut that out. But I thought that was a pretty good summary of how, at least from the National Park Service's perspective, the significance of the work is. I think that there are a number of representatives from different battlefields in the National Park Service who follow the Spirited Chariot site looking for material, and so I know that it's worthwhile from that point of view. This is a URL that will take you to a web page that I created, which will enumerate or list all of the letters written by the sailors that I've done through the years. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 letters so far, and counting. I know that people ask, how do I know that? Well, one of this original eBay dealer that I talked about, that I reached out to and struck this bargain with, began numbering them. I had done a number of him before he started numbering them, but he went. I was doing so many for him that he wanted to number them, so that when I sent back the transcription, he had it coded with the letter, so he made sure he had the right transcript with the letter to sell, because I was doing so many of them for him. And the last batch that he sent me just this last week were it was 13,000 something. So most of these I'm getting from a single source, to be honest. But he's not necessarily the owner of all the letters. He has clients. He has buyers from all across the country, or people who own collections, and they often use him to sell on eBay. So he collects a small commission from them. These are people who don't use eBay themselves, don't want to use eBay, don't want to be bothered with mailing out the letters. He does all that as a service to these people. So he has a number of clients. But I get most of them from him. There's two or three others who are eBay dealers who send me stuff. And then I get quite a bit from private individuals as well, who's helped me out through the years because they've seen my work and asked me to do family collections or diaries that they might have. So this is how Spirited Chariot has grown. As I said, I started way back here doing them, and there's like 15,000 some letters now. I didn't create this Spared and Shared Facebook page until about 6 years ago or so. And so I did that primarily just to raise awareness about Spared and Shared. There are a lot of people on Facebook, Civil War buff kind of people who I thought I could reach out to that community best through Facebook at that time. So what I do on Facebook is really just announce that I've just published a letter on the Spared and Shared website. I say a little bit about it, just a brief blurb to catch their attention. And then there's a link that takes them to the website so they can read the letters, the complete letter. And there's something like 14,000 some followers on Spared and Shared Facebook now who are always looking for. A lot of authors are follow me on that site because they're looking for fresh new material for books as well. Okay, so one of the difficulties I had was alluded to in that talk that Hennessy gave. I didn't think through, because I didn't know how long I was going to be doing this, how's this data going to be accessible, preserved over the long term? What happens when I die, for instance? And if I'm paying a subscription to WordPress and I die and it's no longer paid, does all those letters just go away? Or what happens if WordPress just goes out of the way? They might go away too. It's the largest, I think it's the largest web server that's out there now. I don't think it's likely to, but it could. Or it could be corrupted in some way, because somebody could hack into it and corrupt it or something. And so I started looking for opportunities for this material to be transferred to other web servers. And so, as I said, National Park Service is picking up some of this stuff. Shenandoah University reached out to me, a guy named Jonathan Nerolis, who heads up their Civil War Institute. He proposed to me that he use some of his graduate students who are on stipends to do some work for him, to download a lot of the material into their archives. And he wanted to do it all, and I wasn't sure he knew how much he was actually taking on by doing that. So I don't think they're going too quickly, but they're downloading some of the material as they go onto their web server. The place, however, who's downloading the most is an organization that it's a subscription service called Research Arsenal. If you haven't heard of them before, it's because it's relatively new. It's only been around for a couple of years now. Subscription service that I think charges about $85 a year to belong to it. I think you can get it for shorter periods of time at like $10 a month or something like that. And they are downloading all of the letters, I think diaries too, but certainly all the letters that I had transcribed up through Spared and Shared 22. So the one that I finished just before the one I'm working on now. I think they have that mostly downloaded onto their web server. And it's the nice thing about it is that if you're trying to do some search of Spared and Shared letters, about the only way to do it, because they appear on multiple websites, as I said, Spared and Shared 1, Spared and Shared 2. There's no index that searches all of those different ones. You have to go to each one to search for a topic. And so the nice thing about Research Arsenal is now that all those letters are downloaded into a single server, and it has features where you can just type in keywords, a regiment, a battle, or a combination of words, and it will call up all of the letters that have any references to those items on it, which is a great resource. And for the price, I think is excellent. He wanted my permission to download all of those, and I probably could have done it without my permission. As far as I know, I pretty much made it available. But I was happy to give them permission because I knew it would be another way to save the data and lessen the risk that it might be lost. Plus, I knew it was going to offer this feature to be able to search it, and a lot of people that was their chief complaint, was that they couldn't search it very well. So So that's available today. Just Google Research Arsenal and check it out. You can go into it and try it for free if you like and see if it's something that you're interested in doing. So this is what I already talked about here. So again, Research Arsenal, there is the web address. This is kind of what their screen looks like when you go into it. The nice thing about it, and I'm only talking about the letters and diaries that I've done that are here. And this is one screen out of many. There are so many features that you can get into on Research Arsenal that people will find useful. That it's not just the letters and diaries. It's well worth it, as I said. That you can find photographs and images. They have a lot of them that they got from the National Archives. You can search photos by putting in keywords about a photo. You want to find a soldier wearing a particular type of uniform or carrying a particular kind of rifle or something. It'll call up all the images that are there. Ordnance returns, quartermaster reports, general special orders, marine reports, muster rolls, clothing, books, military forms, civilian research. All of that's available on their website. So as I said, it's a very good value. And they don't pay me to say that, but I do get a free subscription. But
It's the least.
And I do use it sometimes to search my own letters because I'm looking for something in particular that I want to refer to. So what's really unique about these letters or diaries? This is somebody said, can you just kind of frame it? Why is this so unique? And I would say that what's unique about this is that these are all in private collections and they've never been published before. And that's something that appeals particularly to, as I said, book authors who are looking for new material, or maybe they're trying to do research on a topic and they want to corroborate something or establish a fact or something, so they're searching this material. Most never previously transcribed. When they come to me, sometimes there's a transcription that accompanies it that gets passed on to me by the eBay dealer, and half the time it's poorly transcribed, and so a lot of times I don't even look at the transcription that comes to me, but I prepare my own. Sometimes, I think what's fascinating here, sometimes the descendants of these authors don't even know they exist. You know, a lot of letters that were saved by the families that got sent home to Ma and Pa, those were saved by the family and they know about those letters. But when you think about it, there's a lot of Civil War soldiers who corresponded with other people that they knew. And for whatever reason, those families, maybe the soldier died in the war, and so whoever had the letter kept it as a memento, a memory of this soldier who had written to them or whatever. And so they may not even have necessarily lived even in the same community or even same state as the family, and didn't ever even think about maybe returning the letter to the family. So they kept these letters for whatever reason, as I said. And so I'm getting letters that I post on eBay or on my Spared and Shared website. The families, their descendants are contacting me and saying, "Where did you get this letter? I never even knew it existed." In fact, we don't have any letters written by my ancestor. This is the first letter that I've seen, and it wasn't even written to my family. It was written to a cousin or a friend. So it's rewarding to me to get feedback from email from people who are saying, "Man, that made my day." As I said, it's good material for books. I always include the scans of the letters, and I'm now getting them from multiple sources, so that's what's cool about it. These are, some people have asked what are the largest collections I've done. This one was by a guy named Don Newton, who was a captain in the 52nd Illinois. 260 letters that were in that collection alone. And this one I was particularly fascinating to me because he lived only about 2 blocks from where I live in Batavia. So when I walk, I go for a morning walk sometimes, and I walk through the cemetery and I say hi to the captain when I walk by. I feel like I know him pretty well. You can't transcribe that many letters and not feel like you know. Don't get very many letters from Confederate soldiers. I suppose you all know why. Get asked that periodically. Why don't you publish more Confederate letters? First of all, paper was scarce. The mail system was broken down. Most of the letters were passed home by colleague. You know, they gave them a letter to carry home because the mail service didn't exist. And paper was so scarce that a lot of it is disintegrated or fallen apart and or destroyed for whatever reason. So this one was pretty unusual to find as many as 136 letters from a Confederate soldier anyway. This was actually the largest our family did. A guy named Almond Joel Pierce. He started out the war in the 19th Michigan Infantry, and then because his health failed a little bit, I don't know if many of you know about the Mississippi Marine Brigade, but it was created late, I think it was late in 1962. They were having problems with guerrillas firing on transport boats up and down the Mississippi River, and so they came up with this great idea that they were going to put these sort of invalid soldiers that they gathered from hospitals. They were infantrymen, cavalrymen, mounted infantrymen. Put them on the boats, and then so they wouldn't have to march. And when they came to a place where the guerrillas were firing, they'd launch them off the boat and go chasing after them. And so it was kind of a Mississippi Marine Brigade. Well, it's a fascinating brigade because, first of all, it wasn't that large of an organization. And so there aren't a lot of letters that survive from it. Those that do were written by the officers. And the officers tended to embellish their accomplishments and hide their travesties. I guess I would put it that way. And what was interesting is this guy was nothing but a private, and so he told the story as it was. So it's one of the bit. And what I'm showing here is a pile of diaries. This guy kept a diary from the time like 1856 or something until he died in 19 something. Every year there's a diary. So some of these cover multiple years, but there were dozens of diaries that were donated. I only transcribed the 4 or 5 that covered his Civil War years. But these were all donated to a museum over in Michigan, and they called me up and said, "We need your help." Because they were a small museum, they had the resources to do it, they wanted to share this information, and they knew I'd be interested, and so. But they were unwilling to send me the diaries. I had to go over to Michigan and take a picture of every page. The guy was all prepared to send them, and he said, "No, we had a board meeting, and the board decided we couldn't let these letters go, or these diaries go, so you're going to have to come here." And I didn't have a scanner to take, so I had to, my iPhone got loaded up very quickly with the picture. It took me quite a while to do that one, by the way. It took 17 hours to read it. If you were to sit down and read through all those diaries, it would take 17 hours to read it. It would span 4 years. One of the more interesting group of diaries I got was a guy from the 16th Iowa, and this guy did send me the diaries this private citizen sent me the diaries. He said, there's some mittens included. I'll send them to you so you can check them out. He says they belonged to some officer of the Union camp that they raided. And he said, so I was transcribing the letters, and suddenly it came to the point where they're talking about capturing these mittens, and it turns out it was General Sterling Price's headquarters that they invaded. So I had a chance to try on Sterling Price's buffalo gloves. It was pretty cool. So the last thing I'll talk about here is one of the neat things about reading letters and diaries is, especially when you're reading them, you open them up and you're never quite sure what it's going to say and where it's going to take you. I had the chance over the years because because I was transcribing all these, oftentimes, as you well imagine, there were references to Lincoln scattered throughout these letters. And so I began to, whenever I found a reference to Lincoln that I thought was interesting or unusual, I would set it aside, mark it as something that was potential for publication. And I gave a talk to Lincoln Association a couple of years ago over in Canteen, down in near Wheaton, Illinois. And when I was preparing that, I was collaborating with Jonathan White, who was organizing the event, and I told him that I was picking out material, and I said I had a lot to pick from because there's all these extracts and letters that I have, and he asked me to send him a copy. He took him like 97 pages of material that he printed out. And he goes, wow, and he's a Lincoln scholar expert, so when he was reading this, he was like, this is really interesting, this needs to be published. And I said, well, I'm not a book author. You are. He's written like 17 or 18 books, something like that. So I said, you want to publish it? Be my guest. I'm happy to do it with you. And he insisted that I be on there with him as co-editor. It was very nice of him. But he took the bull by the horns and got it to the publisher and did all that. I didn't have to spend any of my time to do that. So the book is interesting from the point of view, as Doug said. These are contemporary references to Lincoln. Some of them are a little startling to read because a lot of people hated Lincoln. A lot of people in the North hated Lincoln, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people. You'd think, oh, just people with Southern sympathies. No, there were a lot of people in the North that hated Lincoln. These are letters that they wrote to their cousins or relatives or friends, and they were, depending on how the war was going at the time, were pretty forthright in their sharing their opinions with each other. And there's some interesting letters in there that one individual and I can recall that he started out in the war being fairly anti-Lincoln, and then later, as you see, the letters are all presented, the excerpts are chronological, and so a little later in the war you can see the same soldier made a comment, and you can see how his opinions had changed over time. So there's some interesting things in the book from that point of view. So the book was published last October, and it's available. Reed Press out of St. Louis is the one who published it, but it's available through them or Amazon. The nice thing about the book that I often tell people is that it's not a book that you necessarily sit down and read from cover to cover. It's not telling a story, So it's a nice book to take with you on a trip or traveling or something, because you can just sit and read a few excerpts at a time as you're going chronologically, and then put it down and pick it back up and go with it. You don't have to remember where was I in the story. So. And it's not a very thick book. There's an example of it back there in the back. And they're available here too, if you'd like advice. Again, these are all previously unpublished. They're chronological. They begin in 1858. They finish with his assassination. There were only a couple from later years. Jonathan, in particular, was loath to publish anything that was kind of written long after the war, because memories changed significantly. When somebody becomes someone's a martyr, their opinions of them become a little different than they were at the time that they were actually alive. So, as I said, this is mostly all contemporary stuff. It does include, as well, a lot of the references to Lincoln also talk about other cabinet members that he may have been with, and there may be some descriptions of those cabinet members, and so those are included in some of them. And then not all the citizens mourned Lincoln's death, that's for sure. There's actually a picture in the book that we found. I had seen the picture before I actually found the letter, which, as soon as I read the letter and I recalled this image, there was a picture of some Union soldiers, I think they were in Chattanooga, who were arrested for celebrating Lincoln's assassination. And they were made to wear placards that said something like, I don't remember what it was now, the picture's in the book. It says something about assassination sympathizer or something like that. It's a phrase that was really unique. And when I was transcribing a letter, and this guy from that camp wrote about these soldiers wearing these placards. And I thought, I've seen that picture. And so I was able to track down the guy who owned the picture, had posted it, and he gave us permission to use it in the book. And so it goes along with the letter.
Interesting.
So these are a couple of examples of some of the books. I thought this one was interesting. The reason I pulled it out here. Anna Ridgely was like an 18-year-old young woman who lived in Springfield, Illinois, and she was writing about Lincoln's election. She says, Wednesday morning we heard of Mr. Lincoln's election. We were disappointed, for we had hoped that such a man as he, without the least knowledge of state affairs, without any polish of manners, would be sent to be the representative of this great nation. But so it is. Someone who knew him personally. And then this one is one that often people are a little stunned when they read it. So this was written by a soldier in September, not long after the Battle of Bull Run. He's writing in camp. He said, Mr. Lincoln reviewed us last Monday, and after the review, he came to our camp and examined our rifled cannons. He thanked us very kindly for our gallant conduct at the Battle of Bull's Run, and when he went away, he went up to where our cook was getting dinner and took a brand of fire and lit his cigar and sat down and had a long talk with our captain. He is a very pleasant, talking man. Anyone would not think he was President of the United States if he did not know who he was. That was written by John Fales. I thought that was interesting. Jonathan about freaked out when he saw that. He's like, I've never heard anybody talk about him lighting up and smoking a cigar before. It's not an image that you see. But they humanize him in a way that you can't find elsewhere, I thought. And this soldier was in the 3rd Artillery. They were not actually in the Battle of Bull Run, but they were called out as the Union troops were retreating from Bull Run. They were called out to kind of stem the tide. They set up their artillery as the Union men were running past them back to Washington, and so they stopped the Confederate advance, and so that's what Lincoln was thanking them for. So in ending, I'll say preserve what you can. That's my chief message whenever I'm on the internet. If not spared and shared, at least considering having your material transcribed somewhere and shared, scans of letters or diaries, so that if the originals are lost, we still have them. I will just say I generally don't handle originals. They come to me as scans. Some people, I will if people feel confident either sending stuff to me in the mail. I don't have a problem with working off originals. It's just that most people are loath to send stuff to the mail. So I tell them I can work with scans. If people don't have scanners, sometimes we'll just send photographs, and I can do that as long as it's a fairly good photograph. And I tell them to remember that this photograph, I won't post the letter without the image, and so the photograph is going to be on the website, so make it presentable. It can't be so you can't read it. And this is how you can get in touch with me, and I think that may be the last slide. Yes. So, questions?
Are you able to use AI to help decipher letters where there's been damage or like fading or poor penmanship or anything? Are you able to sort of enhance them in any way to kind of read them when they're really hard to read?
No, I only use. I tell people when they send the photographs, they go, "Well, it's not very legible." And I said, "Well, don't mess with it. Don't darken it. Don't lighten it. Just take it as it is." I can use my contrast and on my photo editor to try to bring out the text. It's particularly hard on with pencil. You know, the pencil is usually very faint, and so I toy with the contrasts, and it is only, the contrast may not be the same across the entire document. The top of the letter I may need to be dark, and the bottom I need to readjust it when I get down to transcribing the bottom. So I do that online with my computer until I get it transcribed, and then I save the best possible image of it, which is usually a compromise between the top and the bottom of a page or something, and save that, and that's what I put on the website. Now, to your question about AI, a lot of people have talked about these software systems that will transcribe for you. I did try a few years ago that, and found that it's just not very sophisticated in transcribing the script, especially the way people wrote back then, and it didn't recognize a lot of the words. I found that I spent more time editing it than if I just typed it. And so I'm a pretty fast typer, even though I type with one hand. I only use this hand as a shift key, but I type with my right hand. But I do use AI a little bit to create some illustrations. More recently, I've done that. If the letter is talking about an event or something, and I can't find an image that seems to suit, and I generally don't put it on the web page with the transcript, but on my Facebook page, when I'm trying to draw people's attention to it, I will sometimes use an image that I create with AI. And some people say, don't you have to say it's AI? It's like, well, it's kind of obvious it's AI to me, anyways. So, yeah, she was holding her hand first, so go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to know, do you authenticate? How do you know these are all how do you know these are all
That they're
authentic?
real?
Yeah.
That's a good question. People have asked me whether or not I've ever encountered a fake. That's another way to ask that question, I guess. And there is one that I can recall that I thought you can generally tell. If you don't have the paper itself,
Yeah, that's what you're saying. You need to have the paper. Yeah.
you can't hold it in your hand. Generally, that's actually the paper in the Civil War period time was actually better than paper like during World War I, where the paper just disintegrates practically in your hand. It's really hard to handle it. The Civil War paper has a higher wood content in it, I think, and so a rag content, so it's held up better. But there was one letter that just the choice of words and the hand style of writing just didn't look like 19th century, and I sent it back to the guy. I said, I hope this isn't your letter that you purchased, because I think this is a fake. And you can try to sell it if you want to, but I'm not going to transcribe it. Because I think the people that follow me on Spared and Shared have come to know that I only do quality work, and I'm not going to put this out there. There were just some events mentioned in it that didn't seem quite right to me as well. So based on content, style of handwriting, whether or not it looks like a ballpoint pen, whether or not true hand, you can tell the difference there too. So yeah, so I think the majority of the stuff that comes out here, and the other thing is that, it's a double-edged sword again. The value of the material makes it maybe more prone to people wanting to create fakes. But I've not seen it personally. You had a question here.
Do you ever correct the spelling or add punctuation, or if a word is unfamiliar, put in parentheses what that word means?
I do. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I generally mentioned that in my presentation and I forgot. Remember when I started doing this 15 years ago, I didn't necessarily envision that it would evolve into the project that it is today. At that time, when I transcribed them, I decided that I was going to correct the spelling. And my idea there was that I felt that if people couldn't find the letters, then what good are they? And most people find the letters by doing Google searches. They search under a name, Vicksburg, or a family name spelled correctly, or whatever. And if it's not, you all done Google searches before on the internet, you know that if you don't, it won't call up similarities, it'll call up exactly what you typed in. And so I started doing it that way, and I fixed the punctuation too, just because too many times as you read it, you can get lost in a letter if it doesn't make sense to you. And again, with the idea that unless you can find the letter and if you can read the letter, and to the point where it makes sense to you, that if it doesn't accomplish those things, then it's not worthwhile. So I did that. I've gotten some criticism from true transcribers. There's a transcriber community out there, and they will criticize me for correcting the spelling. And I usually, as a comeback on that, I said, well, it's true. I apologize, particularly if this is your ancestor. I made him look more intelligent than he really was. I literally got that comment one time. He was not educated. He made him sound. No, look, I transcribed it that way for those reasons. And where was I going with that idea? This is one of the other reasons why I always post a scan of the letter with it. So you can go into, just click on the little icon of the letter or the image, and it'll enlarge, and you can read the handwriting yourself. And if you want to read it the way they wrote it, be my guest. It will blow up to full size on the screen, so you can do that. But that was one of the things that, just so you know, in that book, A Great and Good Man, that I did with Jonathan, since he's from a college, academia, he felt, because he always transcribes letters directly as they are written, he insisted that everything I had transcribed that is included in that book be put back into the original writing. So it's good. It's good from that point of view when you're reading the book, because you can see it exactly as they wrote it, and you can make some judgment about their educational level and all that by the way they wrote it. But and to be honest, it makes it a little more difficult to read the book, because some people kind of struggle through some of the entries. Most of them are pretty well written. But that is the drawback on that book that I would say, if there is any. More questions? All right, I'm going to right here in front first.
Do you have an understudy coming up the line that's going to work with World War I and World War II? Because I see the importance of what you're doing, and then I'm looking at, well, we're 80 some years away from World War II already,
right.
And there's a lot of information in both of those things that would help us understand those wars as much as understanding the Civil War.
Exactly. Others were going to suggest whether I had an understudy to carry on the work that I'm doing on the Spirit and Share work, and I tried to cultivate a couple of people to do that, and to be honest, they kind of drifted away, because it's hard to do. It's hard to do this work and keep up at a pace and do a lot as much as I do if you have a real life, Somehow I managed to stay married in these last 15 years, but anyway, I make it my priority to go out and take trips and do things that we need to be doing as a family. But I do enjoy getting up every day and doing what I do. As I told an audience one time, this is the next closest thing to actually talking to somebody, in my opinion, to someone who lived during the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's kind of like sitting down at a table and carrying a conversation with somebody when you open up a letter and read it. But World War I and World War II, particularly World War I, items are becoming very valuable these days. I tell people who have them, make sure you're preserving this. as I said earlier, a lot of those letters are falling apart even more than the Civil War letters are. I did transcribe I made an exception to do an archive of letters that were written by a Marine in World War I. And I chose to do it just because it was such a significant archive. This was a Marine that fought at Bellewood in France and drove back the enemy from the outskirts of Paris. So it was a very, sort of where the Marines earned their name, you know, and I felt it was too significant not to include it. It was written by an officer and it was actually very good. So, and that was an exception that I did. And, so I get asked occasionally to do other wars, and I feel like I don't have the time. I have to stay focused, I think, on the Civil War because that's where most of my knowledge is. You just can't. I had to take. It was more than just transcribe for that World War I diary. I had to read up on. I bought a couple books on Bellewood, so I knew what the battle was about. Because, beyond all honesty, it's something we all ought to know something about. It was quite a battle, but I hadn't really heard of it.
Yeah.
I was never a Marine, so it was never my. But yeah. So next question. I think I answered your question. Back in the back.
When you scan in, say, the original letters, do you usually scan at a high resolution and save that, because that takes up a lot of space?
It does.
And then, do you have a particular scanner that you really like? I collect antique photographs, I have thousands, so.
Yeah. No, I don't have a particular scanner that I would recommend. I have a couple different kinds that I use, but I try to, if I'm scanning it from my personal, something that I'm personally saving, I collect some photographs, some daguerreotypes and ambrotypes and tintypes and stuff. And I try to scan those at like, is it 1200, the highest that I can get on my scanner. It brings out a lot more detail, but that's way too high to be posting stuff on the internet. I try to scan at 300 DPI for the websites.
Okay.
So that's a pretty high resolution. You open that up on your computer screen, it's sharp, you know, and that's enough. Anything more than that, I think, on the internet, you're just wasting space, you know, because it can only go so sharp as people's computer monitors, right? And so it doesn't. It just chews up more web space to put the higher resolution stuff on there. And you want your website pages to be able to open fairly quickly. People have to wait for images to download, and that's, you know, they get impatient and go to another site. So yeah, that's the balance you have to consider to do those things. Other question.
I assume that these documents are written with some emotion. How does the transcriber transcribe the emotion, or do they try and remove the emotion from the document?
No, well, a lot of times you can feel the emotion as people are writing it. At least you should be able to feel the emotion, I think, especially if they're writing about battle, or a loss of a friend or something like that. I think it would be, any transcriber would be doing a disservice to try to remove any of the sense of emotion from the writing. I mean, the writing is what it is, so, I mean, and people can read it different ways, and some might strike a chord with some people and might not with others, but I feel that usually the raw emotion, as I said, I don't play background music when I'm transcribing. I stay focused on what's being written, and I try to imagine that I'm talking to them and listening to what they're saying, and you can feel that emotion when you're sharing it. So.
Do you think the Library of Congress or the National Archives would be interested in collecting your material to save for perpetuity?
Well, I know they are because I've talked to them about it, and it's a good question. but they feel they're not authorized. And that's because this material is in private hands. If it were donated to them, and it was their duty, and they're being paid for it, protected, and they're doing a lot to transcribe what they have in their own collections, because there's a lot of stuff that they have that's not been transcribed before, as you probably know. They're working on big stuff for the Revolutionary War right now. You've probably seen some advertisements on the web for that. They're looking for transcribers. Yeah, the individual responsible for that said, I'd love to. As the other Jim Hennessy says, treasure trove of stuff, and it's a shame it's not in the National Archives, but it's not. It's private hands, and they are not. Their document that gives them license to do things says it's not in their scope of work. So I tried. Yeah.
After all these years, are you finding reading these letters any easier?
Oh yeah.
You can go through
Yeah,
them
when
a
I
little
started
bit
out,
faster?
I can do them a lot faster now than I used to. It's amazing how certain phrases that soldiers used just kind of keep reoccurring in letters, you know. A lot of times I might get a letter from somebody who's struggling. I help other people who are trying to transcribe letters that they own themselves. And they'll say, I've got all this transcribed, but I can't make this one line out, you know, could you help me with this? And so I'll read. I can usually read it pretty quickly, and it's oftentimes it's a phrase that was common at that time, but it doesn't make much sense if you don't realize that was a thing that they said oftentimes, the way they said things. So it makes it a lot easier for me to get through a letter now than it used to be.
One of my biggest memories of the Ken Burns series was the really beautiful letter that he read from Sullivan Ballou to his wife Sarah, which I don't think anybody I know who read it didn't have tears in their eyes when they heard that letter.
Right.
Do you know if that kind of helped fuel an interest in, I guess, in value and in interest in Civil War correspondence, because that was such a powerful, moving letter that it was almost probably one of the most memorable things about his whole series.
Yeah, I think it did. You know, of course, that whole series that Ken Burns did probably generated a lot of interest that kind of sparked the imagination of people to look into it a little bit more. I have these cards back here in the back of the room. For any of you want to get in touch with me, my name, address, email, phone number, it's all down here on the back. There's a little, what they call that, QC code? QR code, you know, that you can put your phone on there, and it'll take you to the web page where all of the Civil War letters that I've done can be found. So they actually were all listed on there chronologically or alphabetically by state, and went on, and you would wear your thumb out scrolling down through all the letters. So I broke it up by state now. So when you go to that site, there are different states. Click on the state, and then all the letters are listed, and they're listed by regiment and company. So you just scroll down to the point numerically and alphabetically to what you're looking for. Good?
Thanks so much, Greg.